Emily was born in a small town where life moved slowly and people didn't dream too big. The town was quiet, surrounded by green fields and narrow roads, and most people worked in shops or farms. Emily's parents were simple people. Her father worked in a garage fixing old cars, and her mother stayed at home, washing clothes for some families to earn extra money. They were not rich, and sometimes they even struggled to pay bills. But they were kind and honest people, and they loved their daughter with all their hearts. Emily was different from other children in town. She was born blind. From the moment she came into the world, the doctors told her parents that she would never see. At first, her mother cried every night, and her father didn't speak much for days. They didn't know how they would raise a blind child in a place where there were no special schools, no training, not even many people who understood what it meant to be blind. Some neighbors said they should move to a bigger city, but they had no money for that. So they stayed and decided to raise Emily the best they could. As a baby, Emily was quiet. She didn't cry much. She would just lie in her small wooden crib and listen. She would turn her head whenever she heard a bird sing, or the wind blow, or a car horn in the distance. Her ears were sharp, and sounds became her world. Her mother noticed this and started playing music on the old radio they had. In the kitchen, it was a dusty radio that sometimes made a buzzing sound, but it still worked. Emily loved the sound of the music. She would stop moving and just listen. Her favorite was classical music, the soft sound of the piano, the deep notes of the cello, the fast rhythms of the violin. She didn't know what these instruments looked like, but she could feel them through sound. When she turned 4, something strange and beautiful happened. Emily began to hum the tunes she heard on the radio. She never sang the words, just the notes. Her mother realized she was copying the melodies exactly the way they were played. Even when the song only came once or twice, Emily remembered it and hummed it back perfectly. It was like she had a tape recorder in her mind. Her mother told her father, and at first he didn't believe it. But one night after work, he sat near Emily while the radio played, and then he listened as she repeated the song from memory. He stared at her with wide eyes and whispered, "She has a gift." They had no piano, no instruments, and no money to buy anything. They asked around in the neighborhood if anyone had anything old they didn't use anymore. One kind neighbor, Mrs. Benson, was an old retired teacher. She had an old keyboard lying in her attic. It had many broken keys and only made sound from one speaker, but it still worked. She gave it to Emily as a gift. Emily touched it with her small hands and smiled. She didn't know how it looked, but the feel of the keys under her fingers made her heart beat faster. From that day on, Emily played the keyboard every day. No one taught her. She couldn't read music notes, and there were no music teachers in the town. But she taught herself just by listening. She would hear a song on the radio, then try to find the same notes on her keyboard. She would press one key, then another, and soon she could copy the song just by trial and error. It was hard. Sometimes she would sit for hours, her fingers moving slowly, her head tilted, listening carefully. She never got angry or gave up. She just kept trying until the tune sounded right. People in the town began to talk about her. Some were amazed. Some thought it was a joke. Some said she was just lucky. Kids at school made fun of her sometimes. They laughed when she bumped into things or dropped her books. They called her names like Blind Bat or Music Robot. But Emily never fought back. She didn't talk much. She didn't want to fight or explain herself. She just wanted to play music. She would come home from school, take off her shoes, and sit in front of her keyboard for hours. That was her safe world. Her parents saw how serious she was and decided to support her in any way they could. Her father started working extra hours at the garage. Her mother began washing clothes for more houses. Slowly, they saved a little money and bought a better keyboard from a second-hand shop in a nearby town. It was not brand new, but it had all its keys and good sound. When they gave it to her, Emily touched it like it was a treasure. She cried for the first time, and her parents cried with her. Emily's music became better and more beautiful. She didn't just copy songs anymore. She started making her own. She would play soft tunes when it rained. She would play fast and happy tunes on her birthday. She even made a sad tune when their dog died. Her music spoke what her mouth didn't. Say her parents started recording her on an old phone and sharing the videos with friends. A few of the videos reached some local music lovers who were shocked when they found out the player was a blind girl with no training. One of those videos reached a music teacher in the city. His name was Mr. Harris. He had taught piano for 20 years and had worked with many students. But when he heard Emily's music, he couldn't believe it. He came all the way to meet her. When he saw her play, he sat in silence. Then he asked her to play a piece that he played just by ear. She did it in one try. He looked at her and said, "You are not just talented, you are something rare." But even then, the road ahead was not easy. Mr. Harris tried to get her into a music school, but most of them rejected her. He said she couldn't read sheet music, she didn't have formal training, and she was blind. One school even replied, "We are not equipped to teach such students." Mr. Harris was angry, but Emily just said, "It's okay, I'll learn in my own way." She didn't cry. She didn't stop. She started joining local music contests, but again, it wasn't easy. When she walked on stage with her cane, people looked surprised. Some looked worried. Some whispered. One judge even asked, "Is this a joke?" She played her best, but many times they didn't give her a prize. Some said she played by ear and not by reading music, so it didn't count. Others said it was nice, but not professional. Once after a performance, she heard someone say, "Poor girl, she tries hard, but this is not her world." That night, she sat quietly in her room. She didn't touch her keyboard. Her parents noticed, but they didn't ask. They knew she needed space. The next morning, they found her already awake, playing a soft melody. She had turned her sadness into a song. That's how Emily was. She didn't complain. She created. Then came the news that changed everything. A famous pianist, Victor Beller, was coming to the city to hold a masterclass. Was known around the world, had performed in major concert halls, and had taught only the most talented students. Mr. Harris told Emily, "This is your chance." "I'll help you register," Emily agreed, though she was nervous. She knew Victor was strict and not known for kindness. But she also knew she had nothing to lose. She practiced day and night, even when her fingers hurt. She wanted to show her best. When the day came, her parents took the bus with her to the city. The hall was big, full of lights and people. It was her first time on such a big stage. She couldn't see it, but she could feel the air, heavy, nervous, and full of expectation. As she waited for her turn, she held her cane tight. Her heart beat fast, and her hands were cold. But she told herself, "I came this far. I won't stop now." What happened next would change everything, not just for her, but for everyone who ever thought she couldn't. Emily sat in the waiting area of the large music auditorium, holding her walking cane tightly in her hand. She could hear the sound of people talking, pianos being played, and footsteps moving all around her. She could not see the hall, but she could feel how big and full of energy it was. Sound of high heels clicking on the floor, the opening and closing of doors. The nervous breathing of young musicians, all of it, told her that this was not an ordinary place. It was something important, something powerful. She had never been to such a place before. The music hall was located in the center of the city, in a tall white building surrounded by glass and polished marble. To her, the walls didn't matter. What mattered was what was about to happen inside. The masterclass was being held by Victor Beller, one of the most famous pianists in the world. He had performed in the biggest concert halls in Europe and America. He was known for his perfect technique, his strong opinions, and his very strict nature. People said he rarely smiled, and he often insulted young musicians during his classes. If they made a mistake, he believed in perfection, and he had no time for weakness. Emily knew this. She had heard people talking about him online, and Mr. Harris had warned her. But she still wanted to attend. She didn't come for his praise, she came to learn. She wanted to see how far her gift could take her. There were around 30 other students in the room. Most of them were older than her, and all of them were dressed in expensive clothes. She could tell by the sound of their shoes, their perfume, and the rustle of fancy fabric. Some of them whispered when they saw her. Few even laughed quietly, saying things like, "Why is she here?" or "Is this some kind of joke?" Emily heard everything. Her ears missed nothing. But she didn't react. She had learned long ago that silence was sometimes stronger than words. She just waited quietly with her hands in her lap, her heart calm but alert. The door opened, and a woman with a soft voice called out the next name. One by one, the students went in to perform in front of Victor. Some came out happy, most came out quiet. One boy came out crying, and his mother followed behind him, whispering, "It's okay, sweetheart, he's just mean." Millie's turn was coming closer. Her hands began to sweat, and she rubbed them on her dress. Her father came over and gently put his hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to prove anything," he whispered. "We're proud of you, no matter what." She nodded, then stood up when she heard her name. Her walking cane tapped gently on the polished floor as she made her way into the large room. The sound of the door closing behind her felt loud, like a final drumbeat. She stepped forward. The floor under her feet was smooth. She could feel the wide-open space around her. The silence was heavy. Somewhere in front of her, sitting at a table, was Victor Beller. She recognized his voice instantly. It was deep, cold, and powerful. "Name?" he asked. "Emily Stone," she replied softly. There was a pause. "Ah, the blind pianist," he said, almost with a small laugh. "Interesting." She didn't answer. "Well then, Emily," he continued, "let's hear what you've got." She moved toward the grand piano. It was the biggest piano she had ever touched. She placed her fingers gently on the keys and took a deep breath. She began to play. The first few notes came out gently. She had practiced this piece for weeks. It was one of her own compositions, a song that told a story of longing and hope. But as she continued, her fingers trembled slightly. The pressure, the silence, the weight of the room, it all felt different than her bedroom. She made a small mistake. Just one note, but it was enough. Victor Beller stood up from his chair. "Stop," he said sharply. Emily froze. "What was that?" he asked. "That's not playing. That's guessing." She remained quiet. "Do you even know what you're doing?" he said. "Are you just pressing keys and hoping for the best?" "Oh, wait, of course. That's exactly what you're doing. 'Cause you can't see, can you?" The room was silent. No one laughed this time, as the words were too cruel. "You cannot just close your eyes and expect music to come to you," he said. "Oh wait, you always play like that, don't you?" Emily's heart was pounding, but her face remained calm. "Music is not about feeling sorry for someone," Victor said. "I'm here to teach real musicians, not entertain sympathy." Emily stood up from the bench slowly, her fingers rested on the piano for balance. She turned her head toward where his voice had come from. "May I try one more time?" she asked. Victor laughed coldly. "You want another try?" he said. "Why? So you can embarrass yourself again?" "Please?" she said softly. He didn't answer. But the silence meant she could continue. Emily sat back down. She adjusted her posture. This time she closed her eyes, not because she was blind, but because she wanted to block out everything else. She forgot about the room, the people, the comments. She focused only on the piano, and she began to play. But this time, she didn't play the prepared piece. She played something from her soul, a melody that had no name. A song built from all her memories, her pain, her childhood dreams, her silent tears, her quiet victories. Every note spoke. Every pause had meaning. Her fingers moved with purpose and grace. The notes filled the room like soft rain after a long drought. It was not perfect in the way Victor taught perfection, but it was something more. It was real. It was alive. The air in the room changed. The students in the back stopped moving. Even the assistants and judges stood still. Victor Beller, 4. The first time, said nothing. Emily continued to play. Her fingers told a story that no one could see, but everyone could feel. When she reached the final note, she let it ring out into the silent air. Then she lifted her hands and placed them on her lap. The room was frozen. No one clapped. No one moved. Then, slowly, one person in the back began to clap. then another, then the whole room. Victor Beller still said nothing. Emily stood, held her cane, bowed slightly. She walked out of the room as calmly as she had entered. In the hallway, her parents ran to her and hugged her tightly. Her father had tears in his eyes. Her mother held her like she was made of gold. Back inside the room, Victor Beller sat down again. His hands were folded in front of him, his face unreadable. One of the assistants leaned toward him and said quietly, "Sir?" Victor didn't respond. He just stared at the empty piano, lost in thought. That night, a short clip of Emily's performance was uploaded online by one of the students. It wasn't high quality, but the music was clear. The video showed a blind girl sitting at a grand piano, playing like she had 1,000 voices inside her. The video spread like fire. Within hours, thousands of people had seen it. Then millions. People all over the world wrote comments. Some cried. Some said they hadn't felt something like that in years. Musicians from different countries shared it. Reporters started calling Emily's parents. Her phone rang nonstop, but Emily didn't care about all that. She just sat in her room, in her small house in her quiet town, played the same melody again. Because for her, music was not about fame. It was about truth, and in that moment, she had played her truth for the world. After Emily's beautiful performance at the master class, something inside her had changed. She had felt fear, doubt, and even shame when Victor Beller had mocked her in front of everyone. But when she played from her heart, something magical happened. It was not just music, it was a message. She didn't play to impress anyone. She played to remind herself that she belonged there. Even if the world didn't believe it, but not everyone could accept what had just happened. As soon as she left the stage, people in the hallway started talking. Some students were amazed and couldn't stop praising her. Others were silent and jealous. A few refused to admit that a blind girl without formal training had just played better than all of them. They said things like, "It was emotional, but not professional," or "She got lucky." Emily heard these whispers, but she didn't care. She had walked out of that room with her head held high. She had shown everyone what she was capable of. But what she didn't know yet was that her story had only just begun. That night, while she and her parents sat in their small kitchen eating dinner, the world was already discovering her. The video that one of the students had posted was spreading fast. Thousands of people watched it within the first few hours. Then came hundreds of comments, likes, and shares. People wanted to know who this girl was, where she came from, and how she learned to play like that without sight or formal lessons. By morning, the video had reached over 1 million views. It was being shared on news websites, music blogs, and even on television. Some people called her the blind angel of music. Others called her the girl who plays from the soul. But not everyone celebrated her. Victor Beller was silent. He didn't make any public statement, didn't mention her name or comment on the video. In interviews that followed, he ignored any questions related to her. Some people said he was embarrassed. Others said he was angry. No one really knew. For Emily, this sudden attention felt strange. Journalists started showing up at her door. Neighbors who never spoke to her before were now acting like close friends. Her school principal suddenly called her a shining example of talent and courage. People who once laughed at her blindness now praised her gift. The same children who teased her now asked for selfies. It was confusing. Didn't feel real. Her parents tried to protect her from all of it. They didn't let her read all the articles or interviews. Her father said, "People love stories more than truth. You just keep doing what you do," her mother added. "Today they cheer. Tomorrow they forget. But your music is yours forever." Emily understood. She didn't want to become a media star. She just wanted to play. She received emails and messages from music schools around the country. Some offered her scholarships. Some invited her to perform in concerts. A famous piano brand offered her a grand piano as a gift. She couldn't believe it. She had spent years playing on a broken keyboard, and now the best piano in the world was being sent to her home. Still, she remained calm. She didn't let the attention change her. But one thing did bother her. Victor Beller, he hadn't said a word about her performance. He hadn't apologized. He hadn't even acknowledged what had happened. That silence was louder than any insult. Then one day, something unexpected happened. Emily received a letter. Not an email. A real handwritten letter. It was from Victor Beller. She opened it slowly. The paper was thick, and the handwriting strong and clear. It said, "Emily, I have been in music for 40 years. I have trained hundreds of students. I've performed in every great hall. But I forgot something important. I forgot that music is not just technique. It is not just sound. It is feeling. It is story. You reminded me of that when you played. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Forgive me for my harsh words. They came from pride, not truth. You are a musician, not because you see, but because you hear in ways most of us never will. With respect, Victor Beller." Emily, read the letter twice. Then she smiled. Not because she needed his apology, but because she knew it came from a place of honesty. He had seen something in her music that even he couldn't deny. For someone like him to write such words, it meant more than 1,000 awards. A few days later, it was from a famous music festival in Europe. They wanted her to be the closing performer of the night, the final act, the biggest moment. Emily had never been on a plane before. She'd never even left her town. But she said yes. Her parents were nervous. Her mother cried when she packed her clothes. "You're my little girl," she said. "Now you're flying across the world." Emily hugged her and whispered, "I'm still your little girl, just a little louder now." The plane ride was long. Emily sat quietly, listening to the sounds of the engine, the voices of the flight attendants, and the excited whispers of passengers. She tried to imagine the cities below, the clouds, the stars. She didn't need to see them. She could feel them. When she arrived in Europe, people from the festival welcomed her like a star. She was given a hotel room with a piano in it. She practiced every day. She didn't feel nervous, she felt ready. The night of the performance came. The concert hall was huge, with thousands of people in the audience. The lights were bright and the air was filled with excitement. Musicians from all over the world had performed. Now it was Emily's turn. She walked onto the stage with her cane. The room went quiet. Everyone had seen the viral video. Everyone knew who she was. But this was the first time they would see her live. She sat at the grand piano. It was perfectly tuned, shining under the lights. She placed her fingers gently on the keys. Then she played. She didn't play the same melody from the master class. She had written a new piece for this night. It was called Awakening. It was a song about silence turning into voice, darkness turning into light. Not for the eyes, but for the heart. Each note was like a heartbeat. The audience sat frozen. Some people cried. Others closed their eyes to feel the music deeper. Number one moved. When she finished, the final note echoed through the hall like a breath. Then came silence. Then came thunder. The applause was louder than anything she had ever heard. People stood up. Some clapped. Some shouted. Some simply covered their faces in emotion. Backstage, many musicians came to shake her hand. Some cried and told her how much she had touched them. One man said, "You didn't just play music, you became it." That night, news spread across the world again. Newspapers wrote about her. Music critics called her a miracle of sound. And once again, people everywhere remembered that music didn't need eyes, it needed soul. After the concert, she received a video message. It was from Victor Beller. He sat in his music room, wearing a simple shirt, no fancy clothes, no big titles. He looked into the camera and said, "You taught me something, Emily. You reminded me that music isn't just played, it's felt. From now on, I'll be a different teacher, a different man. Thank you." Emily saved that message in her heart forever. She came back home weeks later. She didn't buy new clothes or expensive things. She returned to her small town, her simple room, and her loving family. The only difference was the new grand piano in her corner and the way the world now looked at her. But for Emily, nothing had really changed. She still played every day, not for fame, not for praise, just for the love of music. Because when she played, she wasn't blind. She was free. Emily sat quietly on the floor of her room, her fingers gently running across the keys of her grand piano. The music she had played in Europe still echoed in her mind. It had been the biggest night of her life, and she had given everything she had, the cheers, the standing ovation, and the message from Victor Belleral. Of it felt like a dream. But now she was back home, where things were slower and quieter. The same walls, the same old neighborhood, and the same little town. Yet, something had changed inside her. She had proved to the world that she could play. That blindness didn't stop her from creating beauty. She had shown her heart to thousands of strangers, and they had accepted it. But she didn't feel finished. She didn't want to stop at one concert or one moment. Deep inside, she felt something growing, an idea, a desire, wanted her. Music to mean more, not just sounds for people to enjoy, but something bigger, something that could help others like her. One morning, as she was having tea with her parents, she asked a question that surprised them. Are there schools for blind children in other towns? Her mother looked up and said yes, but most are very far. Why do you ask? Emily replied. Because I want to visit them. I want to meet children like me. Her father was confused. Do you want to study there? Emily smiled. No, I want to play for them. I want them to hear what I hear when I play. I want them to know that they're not alone. Her parents looked at each other, then back at her. They didn't know what to say. For years they had watched Emily fight silently, grow slowly, and shine quietly. Now they saw that she wanted to give something back. It made them proud, but also scared. She was still so young. The world outside wasn't always kind, but they trusted her, so they agreed. With the help of Mr. Harris and some music lovers from the city, Emily started a small project called Hear Me. It wasn't a charity or a big organization. It was just a name for her dream to travel to places where blind children lived and play for them. Not just for fun, but to inspire them, to show them that blindness was not an end. She began by visiting a blind school in a nearby city. The headmaster welcomed her warmly and arranged a small hall where all the children gathered. Most of them were under 10 years old, some with canes like hers, some holding each other's hands. Emily sat down at the piano, introduced herself softly, and started to play. She didn't play loud or fast. She played gently, slowly, like she was telling a story with each note. The room fell silent. The children sat still, listening with full attention. Some smiled. Some held their heads high as if understanding something deep. Others cried quietly, touched by the music they didn't expect. After the performance, the children came to her, touching her hands, asking questions, laughing, and even hugging her. One little girl whispered, "I want to play like you one day." Emily held her hand and said, "You will. And you'll be even better." Word of her visit spread. Soon, more schools and centers began inviting her. She traveled to many cities, playing in small halls, classrooms, and sometimes even under trees when there was no proper building. She never said no, no matter how far or how simple the place was. Sometimes the pianos were old and broken. Sometimes she had to wait hours because there was no transport. But she never complained. She believed that every child who listened to her music was worth the trouble. Slowly, her small project became something bigger. Newspapers wrote about Hear Me. TV channels invited her to speak. But she always said the same thing. I don't want fame. I want to give hope. One day while traveling back from a school, Emily received an unexpected call.
Oh.
It was from an international organization for disabled artists.
Oh.
They were organizing a global event where the world's best disabled performers would share their talents. And they wanted Emily to be the main act, the closing performer of the final night. The event was to be held in Vienna, a city famous for its rich music history. Emily had heard stories about Vienna since she was a child. She was going there not as a guest, but as the star. The weeks before the event were busy. She practiced every day, wrote a new piece, and prepared her heart. She wanted her performance to be more than music. She wanted it to be a message for every blind person who had ever been ignored, laughed at, or told they couldn't. When the day came, she flew with her parents and Mr. Harris to Vienna. The city was full of life, with music in the air and people. from all over the world walking its streets. The concert hall was massive and elegant, with high ceilings and perfect sound. On the day of the performance, she was taken backstage hours before the show. Technicians helped her walk across the stage to understand the space. She sat at the piano, feeling its shape, its keys, its soul. She talked to it in her mind, like she always did. Let's speak tonight. Not for applause, but for truth. That night, as she waited behind the curtain, she listened to the sound of the audience. Thousands of people had gathered. Musicians, reporters, students, artists. The air was full of expectation. Finally, the announcer called her name. She stepped onto the stage slowly, holding her cane. She wore a simple black dress, no makeup, no sparkle, just herself. The room went quiet. She sat down, placed her fingers on the keys, and began. The piece she played was called Light Without Eyes. It was not just a song, it was a journey. The beginning was soft, unsure, like someone walking through darkness. Then came the middle, a melody of learning, feeling, and hope. And then the end strong, rising like a sun, full of courage and light. The audience listened without moving. The notes told a story they could feel deep in their hearts. When the last note faded, the hall remained silent. Then came the applause, loud, long, and full of emotion. People stood up. Some clapped, some cried. Some just held their hands to their hearts. Backstage, even the organizers were crying. One woman said, "In all my years, I have never seen something so pure." The next morning, newspapers all over Europe had her picture. The headlines called her the girl who sees with her soul. Emily stayed humble. In an interview, when someone asked her, "How do you feel being the star of the night?" she answered, "I don't want to be a star. I want to be a bridge. Between silence and sound, between fear and hope." Her answer touched millions. After Vienna, Emily could have chosen to stay in the spotlight. She could have signed contracts, appeared in movies, or joined shows, but she chose a different path. She returned to her project, Hear Me. She kept traveling, playing in small places, meeting children who had no voice. She taught them to find their voice not with sight, but with feeling. She also began working with other blind musicians, helping them record their music, find instruments, and perform in public. She created a space where they could be seen, not as weak, but as artists. One of her biggest joys came when the little girl she had met in the first school sent her a recording. The girl had learned to play her first song. It was simple, full of small mistakes, but Emily listened to it with tears in her eyes. She called the girl and said, "You did it. You've started your journey." Years passed, but Emily's name continued to grow. People didn't just remember her music. They remembered her courage, her kindness, and her purpose. She had been mocked, ignored, and doubted. But now her music echoed across the world, not just in concert halls, but in hearts. And all of it began because one day she sat at a piano, closed her eyes, and believed. Emily's journey was now well known. From a small town with no money and no sight, she had become one of the most inspiring musicians in the world. But to her, the fame was never the goal. It was always about the music, the sounds that could touch people's hearts, and the hope she could give to those who felt forgotten after the grand event in Vienna. Many opportunities came her way. Famous orchestras invited her to perform. Television shows wanted interviews. Music schools offered her teaching positions. Sponsors wanted her to promote their products. But Emily was careful. She wanted to stay true to herself. She did not want to be just a famous face. She wanted to be a voice for others. She chose to spend her time with people who mattered most to her, other blind children and musicians. She opened a small music center in her hometown called Sound of Light. It was a place where blind and disabled children could learn music without fear of judgment. There were teachers who knew how to work with them, instruments that were easy to play without sight. In a warm space full of encouragement, many children came from far away, carrying hopes and dreams just like Emily had once. With open arms, she taught them not only how to play notes, but how to listen with their hearts. She told them stories about her own struggles, her mistakes, and her moments of joy. She wanted them to know that blindness was not a barrier, but a different way of seeing the world. At the center, Emily worked every day. Sometimes she taught piano lessons. Sometimes she helped students write their own songs. Sometimes she just listened when a child needed to talk about feeling lonely or scared. She became more than a teacher. She became a friend, a guide, and a light. Her life was busy, but full of meaning. She traveled less now, but still played in concerts for special causes, raising money for blind education and music therapy programs. She always made sure to include her students in these events, giving them a chance to perform and show their talents. One of the students, a boy named Lucas, was especially talented. He was shy and afraid to perform in public. But Emily saw something special in him. She worked with Lucas patiently, helping him practice, boosting his confidence, and preparing him for his first big concert. The night Lucas played on stage, Emily sat in the front row, tears in her eyes. When he finished, the crowd gave him a standing ovation. Lucas turned to Emily and whispered, "Thank you for believing in me." That moment meant everything to Emily. It reminded her of her own journey, the long nights alone at the keyboard, the harsh words from others, and the small victories that kept her going. Even with all her success, Emily never forgot where she came from. She continued to live in her small town, in the same house with her parents. She helped her community by organizing free music classes and events. She worked with local schools to make education better for children with disabilities. She believed that real change starts close to home. But Emily's story did not end there. One day, Victor Beller, the famous pianist who had once mocked her, reached out to her again. This time it was an invitation, not just to perform together, but to start a new project. They wanted to create a special concert tour to raise awareness about disability in music. He said he had learned from her that music is about heart and soul, not just technique and sight. Emily accepted. It was a sign that the world had changed too, that barriers were breaking down. Together, they traveled to many countries, playing duets, sharing stories, and inspiring people everywhere. Their partnership surprised many. Some couldn't believe that the man who had once laughed at Emily now stood proudly by her side. But Emily didn't hold grudges. She believed everyone could learn and grow. As the years passed, Emily's music became a symbol of hope. She was invited to speak at international conferences, telling her story to thousands of people. She wrote a book about her life, sharing her struggles and triumphs, hoping to encourage others. Her music recordings were played on radios around the world. She won awards not just for her talent, but for her courage and kindness. One quiet evening, sitting at her piano, Emily thought about her journey. From a small blind girl in a poor town, mocked and ignored, to a musician who had silenced the world with her sound. She smiled softly, remembering every challenge, every tear, and every moment of joy. She knew her story was not just about her. It was about everyone who ever felt different, weak, or unseen. It was about believing in yourself when no one else does. It was about the power of music to heal, to connect, and to change lives. And so, Emily continued to play, not for fame, not for applause, but for the love of music and the hope it brings to every soul. Her music was a light in the darkness, a reminder that sometimes the strongest vision comes not from the eyes, but from the heart.